Welcome to Google Ads Unleashed, the podcast that helps you harness the power of Google Ads. And now your host, Jeremy Young.
Your branded search campaign in your account probably has the highest ROAS, but here's something not many people tell you. It is probably also your least valuable campaign. Some agencies say you should always bid on brand. Others say you should cut brand because it's not incremental. Google says you should always bid on your brand. So what's actually true? That and more in this episode. Hello everyone and welcome back to Google Ads Unleashed. Hope everyone is doing fabulous this Monday. Another episode about brand search. This one actually came up in a training that I did yesterday. So I thought I may as well give a little bit more context on that one and maybe add another episode because I feel maybe from the previous episodes I've told you how to brand search, but I didn't really tell you if to brand search and when to brand search, right? So let's first recap quickly what brand search is and how it should normally look like, right? So with branded search, I generally mean a search campaign where you bid on your own brand. Typically, I always think of branded search in 4 categories. So generic searches, such as literally just for your brand. Then the second type of search that I think of always is brand plus a product name. So that usually applies to sort of larger businesses when people sort of start knowing your product range or even know the name of your product. Very often makes sense to pop that into its own ad group to make own ads for. The third type is brand plus discount code searches. People who are looking for a discount code for your brand. And then lastly, brand plus review or experience searches. Usually I would recommend popping these 4 types of branded searches in their own ad groups with exact and phrase match keywords, never broad. I've tried this very often, broad with brand inclusion and some weird shit that Google recommends. That's not how you do it. Exact and phrase is still a million times better. And typically, I like to use either manual CPC or target impression share as bid strategies because they produce much lower CPCs and it works just a lot better and you waste a lot less money than target ROAS or max conversion. Sometimes I like starting with max conversions if it's a brand new account, but then I typically very quickly revert to TIS or manual CPC. So I've got nothing against that for a short period of time just to really hammer the account when you start an account brand new. But typically those are the bid strategies, and that is usually how a brand search looks like. Its purpose, as you know, people already know you. They look for the brand and you capture them there. Right, I want to now talk about a little bit what many people get wrong when they run these campaigns, because you could follow every best practice that I've just mentioned to you and still make a lot of mistakes. For instance, one of the biggest misconceptions that I feel out there is that people think branded search is always incremental. There is a massive difference between between attribution and actual incrementality. I've talked about this in many other episodes already. Attribution is simply the art of trying to delegate a value to a touch point within your conversion journey. Incrementality, on the other hand, measures whether the touch points that you generated with your marketing actually meaningfully contributed to the sale or whatever you're trying to measure, the lead that occurred. And brand search is one of them examples which has high attribution typically because it produces a superb ROAS, but has very low incrementality, right? So it could show a ROAS of 20, but in reality, for every pound that you put in, you might be losing 90 pence, right? So this is 2 entirely different things. And sometimes you get the opposite with other campaign types, right? So demand gen, for instance, very often has extremely poor attribution numbers, right? And low ROAS and everything. but very high incrementality, because you generate sales which you can't really measure, right? Because people might be seeing your YouTube ads and then clicking on your brand search. So brand search would show high measurement attribution ROAS, whereas in reality it only sucked up the sale that was generated by demand gen in the first place. Okay, so that is what many people get wrong, right? So they think that branded search is pretty much always incremental, but very often what happens is when you cut branded search is that people click on the organic search result anyway, and in the end you can very easily rid of it. Okay, on the flip side, many people sort of hear this and think, oh yeah, I can cut my brand search and then just cut it straight away. And that is the mistake number 2, to cut brand search entirely without actually understanding when it is needed. Okay, so for instance, when it could be needed is with brand new accounts. Okay, if you have new accounts, a very low conversion volume. All right, so let's say you're kickstarting a completely new account, you're already running meta ads, they're kind of working, and then you want to give your Google Ads account a kickstart. I always recommend bidding on your brand at the beginning, because you basically fuel your ad account with people who are interested in your brand. As you know, branded search converts really highly, and it's usually people who are literally our ICPs, our ideal customer profile. So if they search for your brand and you pay only a couple of quid to fill your pipeline with these types of people, well, hurrah, your ad account learns a lot faster and your non-brand campaigns work a lot better. Okay, so that's really something that I highly recommend with new accounts. So don't just cut brand there, keep it running until you can have a non-brand infrastructure which really runs well and which does its own thing, and where you have a precedent or a very good reason to actually cut brand search. Okay, the second reason why I would never cut brands, or when I would never cut brand search, is when competitors are bidding on your brand. Okay, this sometimes happens without them wanting to do it, right? So for instance, their PMax campaigns are simply playing out search ads on your brand name, and your competition might not even do it deliberately, right? It's just their PMax campaigns doing wild stuff. Sometimes they are doing it deliberately, and sometimes they're doing it with a better offer. I've talked about this in a previous episode where a client came to us at the beginning of February because their January has been really poor, and what had happened was their meta ads were actually doing better year on year, but it showed that they were doing worse. And the reason for that is that a lot of generated interest in branded search actually landed with competition, because the competitor, illegally by the way, used their brand name in the ad, which they shouldn't have done. So they obviously got penalized for that, but they actually had a better offer, and they lost about 2,000 customers in January alone, because they lost all those warm buyers to their competitor, right? So there it can be really helpful to keep an eye on it. Sometimes there are some other really competitive industries where, for instance, in SaaS as well, so software as a service, where when you search for branded search, that's very often some of the only real volume that people can bid on. A good example, if you search for email marketing sort of software or something like that, I bet you any money that has a lot less volume than, for instance, MailChimp or Klaviyo, right? So if people search for Klaviyo, you will see other competitors with landing pages saying stuff like why SendRail is better, or whatever the hell they're called, right? So you can really lose your traffic there. So that's when you should actively defend your brand with a good strategy. The second reason why cutting brand completely can be a massive mistake is that you lose ad copy control, right? So your organic search result usually goes to your homepage, and that's the end of it. And that's not always a really good strategy. What we did with AG1, for instance, when we were running their ads, they had a fantastic new customer offer. So we sent the branded traffic to their new customer offer page, right? And that it really worked well. So, and that was more incremental, right? Because we were able to actually not only convert people better than on a organic search result, but we were also generated for how little we paid so much more revenue per new customer, because that new customer offer had a much higher AOV. So you could do other things such as offer free shipping, show your reviews, your USPs, your pushing the bundles, offers, urgency. That control matters, and it can make a difference, okay? So the third mistake a lot of people make is that they don't exclude brand from other campaigns, okay? Especially performance max campaigns. That happens a lot. I see this so often that I've lost count how often I've heard that. So people don't exclude their own brand on PMax, so that targets branded search terms. Then they say, oh, PMax is working really well. They try to push, suddenly it falls off a cliff, and then they don't understand what's going on. It inflates the performance of the campaign, and it does not work when you mix brand and non-brand, okay? It also screws you with your actual search campaigns, right? With your branded search campaigns. So you have to properly exclude brand from all other campaigns, and go and listen to my episode about how to set up a proper brand and non-brand split with PMax and shopping. That is something that I feel is good. Then another mistake that people make is to set the branded search campaigns up like they would set up non-brand, right? I've already talked about sort of broad. I talked about target ROAS and what kind of bid strategies you should be using. A lot of people make that mistake. Go and listen back to the episode of how to set up a brand search, or go back to number 1, where the reason how to run brand search 10 minutes early and into this episode. Okay, so that's a mistake I see time and time again, that people chuck in broad match keywords with a target ROAS as well. That does not work, and it wastes a ton of money, all right? Then something that I see people making a big mistake, and that is actually the last mistake, is that people do not test regularly whether their branded search is incremental. Now, you don't have to design a very complicated holdout test or something like that, right? It's much easier if you just have a look at, for instance, a geo holdout, right? You can pause brand in one region that may be big and important to you if you have enough data, and see what happens. But you could also just switch off branded search completely if no competitor or anything is bidding on it. Now, today when this episode comes out is an ideal time. Test it through the entirety of March and just see what happens, okay? Does, for instance, total revenue drop? If it doesn't drop whatsoever, then fine. Does organic search actually increase bizarrely by the same number of clicks that you would normally get through your branded search? Well, then very likely people are just clicking the organic search result and that's it. Measure that regularly and go back to the episode of how to set up an incrementality test. And it is absolutely something that you should do at least once a year, because if you don't test that regularly, you may be just throwing money out the window, even if it's just a few €100 or dollars or whatever per month. But it's just one of them things that you want to really test regularly. Okay, so summa summarum, when is branded search worth it? It makes sense when you have aggressive competitors bidding on you. It sometimes makes sense during sort of like Black Friday and big sales when you scale in aggressively, because you want to control the messaging in the ad, okay? It sometimes makes sense when you want to have message control. For instance, if you have a new customer offer bundle that you want to send people to. Sometimes it makes sense if that's your strategy, you just want to defend more real estate on the search engine ranking page. Or sometimes your ranking isn't strong, for instance, right? If you've got a brand new ad account or brand new brand, sorry. And sometimes you've got a completely new ad account. And there, again, it makes sense to kickstart your ad account with brand. But further down the line, I would always ask, is it incremental enough to justify the cost that I am spending? So brand search isn't good or bad. There's no one fit for all. It's super powerful, but if you don't understand when to use it or what you should be doing with it, it'll either inflate your ego and look very good in the ad account, or it's going to quietly drain your profit. And I've seen ad accounts throw away dozens and dozens of thousands per year on brand search, which was not incremental. And if you need an expert opinion on that, then just message me. You can find me on LinkedIn, Jeremy and Google Ads. You can also find me via email, jeremy@younganddigital.marketing, or you can book a one-to-one call with me at younganddigitalmarketing.com. The second quarter of the year is soon upon us at the beginning of April. We have opened our doors for more one-to-one coaching. If you are interested in taking your Google Ads strategy to the next level, please be in touch. Otherwise, I will see you in the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Jeremy Young, your personal Google Ads expert, and I wish you a happy and productive week ahead.
Thank you for listening to Google Ads Unleashed. To connect with Jeremy, check him out online at www.younganddigital.marketing. We'll see you next time.